Welcome to MC Noctis, where every shadow has a story. Tonight, listen carefully to the nearest baby monitor. Not for crying, for breathing that does not belong to the child. My name is Leah Morgan. Last October, everyone in my family believed my younger sister Nora had abandoned her 5-year-old son, emptied her savings account, and disappeared with the man who once sold her painkillers. We believed it because her husband had photographs. We believed it because he had messages in her voice. And, if I'm honest, we believed it because Nora had made mistakes before. 3 nights after she vanished, her son's baby monitor turned on by itself. It was not plugged into the wall. The battery compartment was empty. My sister whispered through the speaker, "Lee, I'm under 17. Silo 17 stood at the edge of the Morgan Grain Cooperative, a rusted cylinder whose concrete floor had been poured on the night Nora disappeared. When I entered it, I found no body. I found fingernail marks above 17 foundation bolts, a shadow that crawled without me, and an emergency call from Nora's dead phone. In the background, Grant said, "Hold her legs." An older woman asked, "Is she still breathing?" I recognized the voice. I will not tell you who it belonged to. Not yet. Because the person who strikes the first blow is not always the person who decides a life is no longer worth saving. And sometimes, the cruelest promise is not, "I hate you." It is, "I am doing this for the family." 2 voices eventually came through that monitor. One cried whenever Nora's son answered. The other smiled. By the time I learned which voice belonged to my sister, the floor of Silo 17 had cracked open. Someone was begging me to save him, and a person I trusted still had one hand on the switch, filling the silo with grain. If an unplugged monitor speaks tonight, do not answer simply because the voice belongs to someone you love. The dead are not the only things that remember us, and love is not proof that the person calling your name wants you to survive. Grant arrived at our mother's farmhouse just before supper. He carried Eli in one arm and a blue duffel in the other. My nephew buried his face against his father's shoulder. Grant had not shaved. His wedding ring hung loose on his hand. Mom reached Eli before I did. "Where's Nora?" Grant placed the duffel down. "She's gone." At the kitchen table, he showed us $28,000 missing from their joint account. Messages in which Nora promised someone named Caleb she was finally leaving, and a photograph of a woman in Nora's red coat entering a motel beside a tall man. Grant never called her selfish. He kept defending her. That made him more convincing. Mom did the condemning for him. "Nora always chooses chaos," she said, "even when someone builds her a decent life." My sister had struggled after Eli was born. Prescription pills became the only way she slept, then the only way she functioned. She had been clean for 2 years, but Mom still introduced every good thing Nora did with the words, "for now." Grant knew which version of her our mother kept alive. So did I. I looked at the photograph and saw the sister I already feared she might become again. Eli sat beneath the table, arranging dried corn into a circle. "Mommy's in the silver room," he said. Mom pulled him out. "Your mother chose not to come home," she told him. "You must stop calling for people who leave." The words were too hard for a 5-year-old. They were also the first time I understood that Mom preferred a clean wound to an uncertain one. That night, Eli slept in Nora's old room. The baby monitor on the dresser had no cord and no batteries. At 2:17, static woke me. The receiver beside my bed glowed green. Nora's lullaby played through it. I crossed the hall. Eli stood inside an old crib he had outgrown 2 years earlier. His body faced the wall. His head was turned toward me at an impossible angle. "Eli?" His lips remained still. Nora's voice came from the monitor. "Don't let them pour the second floor." Something knocked beneath the carpet and traveled across the room until it stopped under my feet. Eli opened his eyes. They were filled with kernels of black corn. He whispered, "Grandma told Mom to be quiet." The lights came on. His eyes were normal. Wet cement was rising between the floorboards. By sunrise, the cement had vanished. Only a grey handprint remained beneath Eli's crib. Grant arrived before I called. He said the cooperative had suffered an equipment failure and asked Mum to keep Eli another day. When I asked what he was repairing, his eyes moved to the handprint. Silo 17. The Morgan Grain Cooperative stood beyond our fields. My father had worked there until an auger took 3 fingers from his hand. Grant managed it now, but the land and buildings belonged to our family trust. 36 local farms depended on it. Our own farmhouse secured its largest loan. Silo 17 was the oldest structure on the property. Inspectors had found a fracture beneath its foundation, and Grant had scheduled a second concrete floor to cover the first. The pour would begin at noon. I told him what the monitor said. He stared at Mom before answering. Nora used to tell Eli ghost stories about those silos. Don't make him worse. After he left, Eli drew the silver room. His mother lay beneath a thick grey line. Above her, a tall woman poured black corn from a bucket. Eli colored the woman's mouth far beyond her face. "Who is that?" "Grandma, when she smiles." Mum tore the drawing in half. "Children repeat whatever frightened adults teach them." I had worked as a 911 dispatcher for 11 years. Voices were evidence to me. I knew how panic shortened breath and how rooms changed sound. So I recorded the next transmission. At 2:17 that afternoon, while the concrete truck crossed our field, the dead monitor whispered, 17 below me. Don't let them make 18. Beneath Nora's words, I heard the metallic resonance of an empty silo. Then a second voice entered. It sounded exactly like her, except it was smiling. "Open the floor, Leah." Every heating vent in the farmhouse burst open. Corn flooded the rooms. It came in a roaring yellow wave, filling the hallway within seconds. Mom screamed. I fought toward Nora's bedroom, but the door would not move. Eli cried on the other side. When I forced it open, the corn reached his chest. Hands moved beneath the surface around him. I lifted him. Something seized my ankles and pulled. I fell, losing Eli beneath the grain. For 1 second, a woman stood in the corner. Her face was Nora's. Her smile belonged to Mum. Then the corn vanished. Eli lay on the bare floor, coughing grey dust. The monitor spoke beside him. One voice begged, "Don't open it." The other whispered, "I can show you what she chose." I stopped the concrete truck at the cooperative gate. Grant threatened to call the sheriff. Mum arrived behind him and ordered me to move my car. "If this cooperative closes," she said, "families lose their farms because you heard a voice in a toy." I played the recording. For a fraction of a second, Grant looked frightened. Mum did not. "That is not Nora," she said. She was right about part of it. One breath beneath a smiling voice, repeated at identical intervals. It had been assembled from a recording, but the words, "Don't open it," trembled differently each time.
Before either of them could take my phone, I walked towards Silo 17. Fresh concrete circled the base, though the truck had not poured it. Someone had laid a thin layer during the night. Inside, my flashlight illuminated an empty metal cylinder. Its curved walls returned each footstep from behind me. At the center of the floor, 17 bolt heads formed a ring beneath the newer concrete line. Fingernails had scratched one sentence into the steel until they broke. "Don't answer me." Something breathed against my neck. My shadow stood on the opposite wall. It was not copying me. While I remained still, the shadow lowered itself to all fours and crawled around the silo's curved interior. Faster with every circle. Metal boomed beneath its hands and knees. My phone rang. 911, incoming. Leah Morgan. At first, I heard a truck reversing. Then Grant. "Hold her legs!" An older woman coughed. "Is she still breathing?" The call ended. The crawling shadow stopped above me and peeled itself from the steel. I ran as it dropped. Grant pulled me through the doorway a second before it struck the floor. Behind us, Silo 17 rang like a bell. He gripped my shoulders. "Stop digging." I showed him the call log. His face collapsed. Mom took the phone before he could speak and deleted the entry. "There was no call," she said. "I heard you." She looked directly into my eyes. "Then grief has made you cruel." That evening, I played my backup recording at the kitchen table. Mom heard her own cough. She did not cry. She locked the door. Then she asked whether I understood how many lives one daughter could destroy. Mom told me Grant called at 1:38 on the night Nora vanished. He said Nora had discovered missing cooperative funds, attacked him with a tire iron, and collapsed after he struck her back. Mom found my sister unconscious in the office. Blood soaked one side of her hair. Grant wanted an ambulance. Mom stopped him. An audit would expose the stolen reserve, bankrupt the cooperative, and take our farmhouse with it. Grant would go to prison. Eli would lose both parents. 36 farms would lose their buyer before harvest. Nora was breathing, I said. She had destroyed herself before, Mum replied. She would have destroyed everyone else this time. Together, they carried her to Grant's truck. Mom held her ankles. The emergency call had not captured the murder. It had captured my mother, deciding there would be no rescue. She claimed Grant was supposed to drive Nora to a private clinic after they secured the records. Before dawn, he returned alone and said Nora had awakened and fled. Mom cleaned the blood from the office. Then she helped him tell the story our family would believe. She still denied knowing about the silo. From the living room, Eli began singing Nora's lullaby. We found him sitting before the dead monitor. Two versions of my sister's voice argued through it. One sobbed, "Lee, don't listen." The other laughed. "Ask her what I said in the truck." Mom threw the monitor against the fireplace. The plastic shattered. Nora's laughter continued from every piece. The room went dark. Something walked around us, dragging one foot. Each time it passed, cold fingers brushed my neck. I switched on my phone's flashlight. Nora stood behind Mom. Her scalp was split and concrete filled her mouth. She rested her chin on our mother's shoulder. "Tell Leah what I called you," she whispered. Mom's composure broke. Nora had awakened in the truck. She had called for her mother. Mom sat beside her beneath a tarp, held her hand and promised Eli would remember her before the pills. Then she told Grant to keep driving. "You knew he was burying her." Mom wiped her face. "I knew she could no longer come home." The sentence frightened me more than the ghost. She had not chosen Grant over Nora. She had chosen a version of the family in which Nora's death was useful. Grant kept the cooperative office locked, but my father's old key still fit the rear door. I entered after midnight. Nora's phone was inside Grant's desk. He had removed the battery and SIM card, but the device contained folders of clipped voice messages from her addiction counseling. "I'm sorry. I need to leave. Tell Eli I love him." An audio program had stitched them into the confession our family received. Another folder contained instructions recorded in Mum's voice. "Move the money before sunrise. Use the red coat in the motel photograph. Do not accuse Nora. Let us do that for you. Bring Eli on Friday. Look exhausted." Grant had committed the crime. Mum had directed the performance. The missing $28,000 had gone to an equipment company Grant secretly owned. Camera footage showed his truck and a concrete mixer entering Silo 17 at 2:09. Mom sat in the passenger seat. I attached every file to an email for Rachel, the night supervisor at my dispatch center, and scheduled it for 2:30 a.m. If I did not cancel it, she would receive the evidence, my location, and a request to contact state police. Nora's dead phone lit up. It displayed an incoming call from my number. My own voice whispered, "He is behind you." Grant stood in the doorway. He no longer looked like a grieving husband. He struck my phone away and locked the door. I asked whether Nora had discovered the embezzlement. "I hit her once," he said. "Your mother made everything after that possible." "Was Nora alive when you poured the concrete?" His eyes moved toward the floor.
Ask Diane why she sang a lullaby at Silo 17. He came toward me. Every disconnected desk phone began ringing. Wet footprints crossed the ceiling from the door to Grant's chair. Nora lowered her face through a ceiling tile. Concrete packed her mouth. When she screamed, the sound came from all the phones at once. Grant fell backward. I broke the window with a chair and climbed through. As I ran, he shouted that the sheriff would hear about my break-in, my obsession, and the imaginary calls from my dead sister. When I reached the farmhouse, a patrol car was already waiting. Grant had reported me first. He had a clean reputation. Mom had the story. And I had an empty pocket because my phone, Nora's phone, and the flash drive was still inside his office.
The sheriff believed Mum. She told him grief had made me reckless. She denied everything she'd confessed at the kitchen table. Grant offered not to press charges if I agreed to rest until morning. He looked merciful. I looked unstable. After they left, Mum made tea. I poured it into the sink when she turned away, then carried the empty cup into Nora's bedroom and pretended to sleep. At 1:50, Mum opened the door. She stood over me until she was satisfied my breathing had slowed. Then she sent a message. "Leah is asleep. Come to 17. We end this tonight." The broken monitor clicked on beside my head. One voice whispered, "Lee." Only Nora called me that. The other said, "Leah, your mother wants to keep you." Eli crawled from beneath the bed with the transmitter pressed to his chest.
"There are two mummies,"
he whispered.
"The crying one says run. The smiling one says Grandma can make us a family again."
The bedroom door opened. Mum saw my eyes. She did not call Grant. She came in herself. I climbed through the window with Eli, but the corn outside was already bending toward us in a widening circle. Nora's voice came from everywhere. "Lee, don't answer when it calls your name." Then the smiling voice called,
"Eli, Mummy's here."
A woman in Nora's red coat stood 10 rows deep, facing away. Eli ran toward her. I caught his shirt. The woman's head rotated backward, while her shoulders remained still. Her face had no eyes or nose, only a round black opening filled with moving grain. It screamed my name. The corn flattened. Mum struck me from behind with the handle of a shovel.
As I fell, I heard Eli begging her to stop. She knelt beside me and spoke with the patience she used when we were children. A mother cannot save every branch, Leah. She cuts the diseased one so the tree survives. Nora wasn't diseased. Nora would have taken Eli, the farm, and 36 livelihoods down with her. Mum wiped blood from my forehead. I kept this family together once. I will do it again. The last thing I saw was Eli kicking her shins while the faceless woman watched from the corn. When I woke, metal trembled against my cheek. My wrists were tied behind a ladder inside Silo 17. Grant was bound to another support across from me. Above us, grain rattled through the pipes. Mum's voice came over the silo intercom. "This time," she said, "there will be no one left to tell the wrong story." Then she started the auger. Corn struck us like hail. It filled the silo with a roar, warm from the machinery and thick with dust. Mom had tied my wrists with electrical cord. I sawed it against a foundation bolt while the grain rose past my thighs. Grant screamed at the intercom. "Diane, we had a deal!" He had come to Silo 17, believing they would move Nora before I could return with police. Mum gave him whiskey containing the same sedative she put in my tea, then tied him beside me. Mum answered from the control room. "You became frightened. Frightened men confess." She said Eli was asleep at a neighbor's house and would remember none of this. Her new story was simple. Grant, exposed as a thief, had abducted me and returned to move Nora's body. We fought inside an active silo and died together. Mum would become Eli's only stable guardian. The cooperative would survive long enough to refinance. She was not protecting Grant. She had never protected Nora. She was protecting the shape of a family in which she remained necessary. The cord snapped. By then, corn reached my waist. Every movement pulled me deeper. I leaned against the ladder, spread my weight and kept one arm above the surface. Something touched my ankle. Faces formed beneath the moving grain. Workers, drifters, children, each appearing for a second before collapsing into kernels. "Open the floor, Leah," they said together. The smiling voice shook the silo. From beneath the concrete came a weaker answer. "Lee, don't!" Nora. Grant freed one hand and clawed toward the ladder. I asked what happened after Mum told him to keep driving. "Nora woke completely at the silo," he gasped. "I wanted to leave her at the hospital. You poured the floor. Your mother pushed her into the excavation." The metal wall dented inward. Grant began crying. "Nora held Diane's coat and begged. Your mother sang the lullaby so Eli would be the last thing she heard." Above us, Mum increased the auger speed. The corn reached my ribs. Grant lunged for the ladder and dragged me into the grain. We fought for the same rung. His boot struck a pry bar lying near the foundation. He seized it and hit the concrete ring. One bolt cracked. The smiling voice laughed. 16? Grant swung again, trying to free his trapped leg. Another bolt broke. 17? The floor dropped. Black air erupted through the fracture. It smelled of burned grain, stagnant water, and bodies sealed without names. Nora's hand pushed through. Her fingernails were gone. Concrete filled every wound. Still, the hand found Grant's wrist and held it. The floor opened into an old shaft packed with bones. Grain drained through the gap, pulling Grant toward it. He clutched my ankle and confessed everything. Embezzlement, the blow, the concrete, the false recordings. The voices below repeated each confession in the voices of the dead. I caught the ladder. Grant hung from me. Saving him would have cost only my grip. I looked toward the control room window. Mum stood behind the glass with one hand on the switch. She watched Grant disappear. Then she pushed the auger to full speed. The grain covered my mouth.
Red and blue lights flashed outside. At 2:30, my scheduled evidence had reached Rachel. State police broke into the control room. 2 officers dragged Mum from the switch. Even on the floor, handcuffed beneath them, she kept reaching toward it. The rescue crew entered on safety lines. As they pulled me free, the floor continued speaking. Some voices begged to be uncovered. Others begged us to close it. Nora's was the last I recognized. "Don't let it learn, Eli." Something beneath her repeated the sentence perfectly. This time, it used Mum's voice. They recovered Nora 3 days later. She lay beneath the newer concrete with one hand pressed against the underside of the floor. Cement dust was deep in her lungs. Grant's body was tangled in the old grain shaft below her. He was not alone. Investigators found fragments belonging to people who had disappeared near the cooperative for more than 60 years. Silo 17 had been built over a place where unwanted workers and strangers were hidden long before my family owned the land. Mum was charged with conspiracy, evidence destruction, kidnapping, attempted murder, and Nora's death. At the preliminary hearing, the prosecutor asked whether she regretted refusing the ambulance. Mum looked at Eli, then at me. "A mother chooses the child who can still be saved." She said it without anger. That was worse. Several cooperative members wrote letters asking the court for mercy. They said her decisions had protected harvest contracts, jobs, and the only grain buyer in the county. People prefer a monster whose cruelty kept something useful alive. We buried Nora beneath a maple tree far from the cooperative. During the service, Eli watched the empty road behind the mourners. "Crying mommy left," he said. "What about the other one?" He pointed toward a storm drain. "She says Grandma opened a door." The county demolished Silo 17 and filled the shaft. It did not matter. Eli came to live with me 40 miles away. For 2 months, no monitor turned on by itself. No corn appeared beneath his bed. He stopped talking to the walls. Then, at 2:17 one morning, Nora's lullaby woke me. The broken monitor on Eli's dresser glowed green. "Eli," Nora's voice whispered, "come outside. Mummy found somewhere new to sing." I covered his ears. The voice became Grant, then Mum, then every 911 caller I had ever heard die while waiting for help. Finally, it became me. "It's safe, Eli. Aunt Leah says you can come." Outside the window, corn kernels formed a trail to a storm drain. Something moved beneath the grate. It stopped calling Eli. It called me. My mouth began shaping an answer before I could resist. I bit through my tongue to remain silent. The monitor laughed in my voice. Mum had believed family was something she could preserve by cutting people away. But whatever escaped Silo 17 understood family differently. To it, family was simply a collection of voices we would always answer.
And somewhere beneath our house, something is still practicing the way I say my nephew's name. What frightened you more, the thing beneath Silo 17, or the mother who believed murder could be called protection? Tell me in the comments whether Diane loved her family too much, or whether love ended the moment she decided one daughter was expendable. Thank you for listening to MC Noctis. If this story stayed with you, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who understands that familiar voices are not always safe. Until our next story, keep your doors locked. Question the people who claim cruelty is for your own good. And remember, some monsters hide beneath concrete, others sit at the family table and call themselves mothers.